Kiddushin Daf concludes the Gemara's discussion of a number of cases in Kesef Kiddushin in using valuables or money to accomplish a marriage betrothal to do Kiddushin. The Gemara is going to discuss 3 incidents that happened and what the halacha is in those cases, and then we'll wrap up the halacha and a number of other cases which we discussed earlier. Then the Gemara will get into Kesef into Kiddushin with a shtar, with a contract, in some cases into the specifics of how that works, and then Kiddushin Bia, Kiddushin with marital intimacy and how that works as well. So let's begin. The Gemara in the last 5 words on Daf Ches. The Gemara discusses 3 cases. Now all these 3 cases are similar. They are a man who had something and a woman demanded some of it from him, and he said, "Will you be miskadeshes to me if I give it to you?" And she answered with an abrupt, "Just give it to me already." And the expression in the Lashon of Chazal is she said Hava Mahava, or something along those lines. She said, "Just give it to me, give it to me." So the Gemara says that if she says it in that expression, she's ignoring what he said. She's not agreeing to be miskadeshes when he said that. She's just saying, "Give it to me already." Now, the 3 cases here, the first one is you had a peddler who was selling trinkets or jewelry, necklaces or bracelets that had charms hanging from them. She demanded one, and he said, "Will you be miskadeshes to me?" And she said, "Just give it to me already." So that's not mikudeshes. The second one is the guy was drinking in a bar and she asked for a cup of wine and they had the same exchange. And the third one is he was picking dates off a tree. She asked for 2 of the dates and they had the same exchange. Now, why do we need the chiddush of all these 3? So Taisu says the first is non-food. So therefore, it's less likely that she will be interested in Kiddushin based on that. The second one is drink and the third one is actual food. Now, the Gemara says, what would have happened if she didn't answer in an abrupt, rude Hava Mahava, if she just said, "Give it to me," or if she said, "Give me a drink," or she said, "Give me some to eat"? So there the Gemara says it's machlekes. The Gemara says that Ravina says that would work. She's not answering rudely. That means she's agreeing. Sababar Eriksa said, by the crown of the king, it does not work. Says the Gemara, let's wrap up the halacha here. Halacha l'maisa, that does not work. Another thing we see halacha l'maisa is that when he's mekadesh her with a certain object, let's say silk clothing, it does not have to be evaluated. We had machlekes about that before. If it was worth what he said it's worth, does that have to be evaluated or not? Do we assume that she relies that it is worth what he says? And then we have that the halacha is like Rav Elazar, the Gemara says, that's referring to where he says, "Mi miskadesh to me with a mana," and he gives her a dinar. So Rav Elazar said that it's Kiddushin, and he has to pay the rest of it. It's Kiddushin with what he gave, and the rest of the money he owes is like a tanai. And the last halacha is like Rava and Rav Nachman, who said that if somebody promises a mana for Kiddushin, and he gives a mashkon, he didn't give not the mana and not the mashkon yet, so there's no Kiddushin yet in any form. The Gemara now goes into the form of a Kiddushin with a shtar, with a contract, and the Gemara is going to show with a brisa how the basic framework of Kiddushin with a contract works, and then the Gemara is going to question what the sources are and have some contradictions. So we'll begin with the brisa. The brisa says that what is Kiddushin with a shtar? Somebody writes on a contract, either he writes it on a paper or he writes it on a piece of pottery, either any writing surface, even though it has no value. That is, he's using something which is valueless, because if it's written on something that's valuable, then it's Kiddushin Kesef, not Kiddushin Shtar. Here, the Kiddushin is the writing, the content of the writing, not the value of the object. And he writes, the Gemara discusses where he's being Mekadesh the girl through her father, that is, she's of the age that the father can be Mekabel Kiddushin for her. And he writes, "Your daughter is Mekudeshes to me, your daughter is Me'urezes to me, or your daughter is my wife, should become my wife," then it is a valid Kiddushin. So Mar S, this is very different than the standard use of a contract. Standard use of a contract, the person who's giving away the value, the thing which is being changed rishus, he's the one who writes it. Like the seller of the field writes in the contract for the purchaser of the field, "I'm selling my field to you." Here, though, you have the purchaser, as it were, the husband. He's the one who's writing the shtar and giving it to the one who's giving it up. So that's not standard how a shtar works. Why is it different than a standard shtar? And how we know that that's the way it's meant to be? So the Gemara answers, the pasuk, when it talks about a contract of sale and talks about a contract of marriage, describes it in this way. Contract of sale is described from the perspective of the seller writing it and giving it, while a contract of marriage is discussed from the position of the husband. Now, Rava brings the psukim, and the Gemara is going to challenge it. The psukim, Rava says, is it says, if somebody sells from his properties, that's the seller who's doing it. And as far as the marriage, it says, ki yikach ish isha. And it's talking about where the husband is doing it. So he's the one who's the active member of this, therefore he's the one who writes the shtar. So Gemara asks, there are other psukim. It says, Sados ba'kesef yiknu, that fields with money they should purchase. It's written from the perspective of the buyer. So therefore maybe the buyer should also be the one to write the shtar. Somewhere says, no, you read that wrong. It's not ba'kesef yiknu, it's ba'kesef yaknu, which means that they will give to someone else through a sale. They will sell to someone else. Not that they will purchase, but that they will sell. So the Gemara says, why do you change the reading to that? Because of the pasuk we brought that has it from the perspective of the seller. So you can also change the pasuk by Kiddushin, because we also have a pasuk that has it from the perspective of the woman. You could say in place of ki yikach ish isha, it should be ki yakach ish isha, when a man gives over a woman to someone else, and it's referring to the father, and that's based on the fact that it says this beating nasati lishazah from the perspective of the father that he gives her over. So the Gemara therefore gives a different answer. The Gemara says it's halachah l'maisha misinai, that this is how a shtar is written. The psukim we just brought is just an asmach. There's just a hint, a reliance, but it's not an actual source. Second answer is because we have another pasuk which is not something you can get out of. It says in Sefer Yirmiyah, "Ekach Sefer Hamakna," I took the document of the sale, and therefore you see that it has to be from that perspective. That's referring to the sale of a field that Yirmiyah performed, and is Ekach Sefer Hamakna, that the shtar was taken from the makna, from the one who gave over the field. Now the Gemara goes further. The Gemara says that Rava said, in the name of Rav Nachman, somebody writes on a paper or on a pottery shard, even though it doesn't have a shavar pruta, your daughter is mekudeshes to me, your daughter is mu'aresses to me, your daughter is my wife. Whether it is given to the woman or to her father, it works as long as you have two conditions. The father agrees, and the daughter is of age for the Kiddushin to be accepted by her father. That is, she's not a bogera, she's either a katana or a nara. See, because it's phrased as your daughter, it has to be that way. However, the girl can be mekabel herself even if it is written as your daughter. Now, if it's written to her, it's written as you, so then you have the same halacha, just reversed. It can be given to her or to her father, but it has to be with her agreement, and it has to be when she is of age that she can be mekabel her own Kiddushin, that is, she is a bagera, she's above the age of 12 and a half. Next, the Gemara wants to know if a shtar Kiddushin has to be lishma. So Shimon Lagish asks, shtar Erison, which is a shtar Kiddushin, which is written shlei lishma, is that good or not? What's the question? Do we link it to a shtar yitzia, that is a get, and just like a get has to be written lishma, it has to be written for this specific woman, and for all the other details that are specific to this event. Therefore, we link it to a shtar Kiddushin because it says v'yatzav ha'isa, and a shtar Kiddushin also has to be lishma. Or do we link a shtar Kiddushin to other forms of Kiddushin, like Kiddushi Kesef, which does not have to be lishma? The money doesn't have to be made or set aside l'shem this isha and this Kiddushin. So he answered that it's logical that it's linked to Gittin, because the entire concept of shtar Eirsin is really learned from Gittin, and therefore it does have to be lishma. So then the Gemara asks, does it have to be actually written lishma or not? So what if it was written lishma, but she doesn't know about it? That is, she did not yet agree to it. It was written for her to be mekadesh with, but she, at the time of the writing, was not yet involved. She was not yet written. She was not yet in on the deal, and she had not given her agreement. This is a machlekes. Rava and Ravina say that it works. It's mekudeshes anyway. Rav Papa and Rav Sharavi say it's no good. And Rav Papa explained the reasoning of both sides. The get does not require the woman to be involved in it. It could work even makar. She doesn't need to know about it. And therefore, the position of Rav and Ravina is that you could learn from get to a shtar Kiddushin that it does not have to be that she knows about it either. Rav Papa says, no, pay careful attention. In the get, the makneh has to know about it. The makneh has to agree to it. The makneh there is the husband. Here, the makneh is the woman. So you do need the makneh to agree to the Mesira, to the giving over of herself in the case of Kiddushin. So the Gemara says we should seem to have a proof to this discussion. We have a brisa that says you can only write shtar of erisin and nisuin with the understanding and the knowledge of both of them. It seems to be clear that a shtar erisin has to be written with her knowledge and understanding. So Gemara says it's not talking about a real shtar erisin like we say here. It's talking about the document where the two sides draw up the terms of the marriage. Who's going to pay for what? Who's going to give what? Who's going to support what? And the Gemara quotes Rav, name of Gidel. The Gemara quotes Rav Gidel, name of Rav, that says that they wrote up a shtar. How much are you giving to your daughter? How much are you giving to your son? And then they made the Kiddushin. That is a kinyan with words, and that is what this is referring to as well. The Gemara now moves on to Kiddushin with the Bia, with marital relations. So the Gemara brings another source for it. We've already brought a source for this before. Now the Gemara brings Rabbi Avon, and Rabbi Yochanan says the source is because the Torah uses the phrase Be'ula's Baal to say that Be'ula makes a Baal, makes a husband. So Rav Zera asked Rabbi Avon, some say it was Rish Lakish, to Rabbi Yochanan, why are you looking for a new source? We already said it earlier in the Masechta that Rabbi said it's learned from the fact that it says Ubala. It says Kiyikach Ish Isha Ubala. And that Be'ia shows that it makes a Kicha, Kiyikach Ish Isha Ubala. So that is a Kinyan Be'ia. So why do you have to have another source? So why is Rav Yochanan coming up with another source of Bulas Baal? So Gemara answers, Rav Yochanan's problem with the Rebbe's source was that it says first Kiyikach Ish Isha and then Uvala. That sounds like it's one Kiddushin that begins with a Kiyikach and ends with a Uvala. First you have to do Kiddushin Kesef and then you have to do a Bia, and that completes the Kinyan. That's what that sounds like. So that's why he didn't like that source. He said you have to have another source of Bulas Baal. Now, the Gemara understands that Rav Yochanan meant that every Kiddushin of Kesef has to end with a Bia, and is the Gemara, the completion of the Kiddushin is the Bia. You have to have Kesef and Bia together. That's one Maisa Kiddushin. So the Gemara asks on that, the Reb Zera asked Rabbi Avo, the Gemara asked on that, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo asked, so if that's how you do a standard Kiddushin, so how do you have a Nara Amarosa that gets Gila? The halacha is, if you have a girl who's engaged, she's a Nara, and she's in Arusa, she's engaged, and she's a Besula, and somebody is Baal her, that person gets Skila. She gets Skila and he gets Skila. But it's only if she's in Arusa and she is a Besula, who has not had Bia. So how do you have that? According to this, she's not in Arusa until after a Bia. So if it's before the Bia, she's not in Arusa yet. And if it's after the Bia, she's not a Besula. So the Gemara gives a few answers to this. So the Gemara says that the Rabbanan said to Abaye, you found this where he did a Bia Shalei Kedarka. That's he gave Kesef Kiddushin, and then he completed it with a Bia Shalei Kedarka, and which is not the normal place of the Bia, and therefore she is still considered to be a Besula. Her Besulim has not been broken by the Bia Shalei Kedarka, but it is a Bia that completes the Kinyan that's begun with the Kesef in this Havamina Pshat, that's how Kiddushin Kesef and Bia works. So the Gemara says that can't be. Abaye said, we've seen the Machakas between Rebbe and the Rabbanon, whether Bia Shalei Kedarka makes a girl not a Besula any longer. The Gemara is going to quote that soon. But that Machakas is only other people, not her husband. If it's her husband, it most definitely makes her not a Besula. Some more quotes that. The Gemara says, you have a brisa that discusses what happens if this Nar HaMarasa has Bia with 10 men. And she's a psula at the end of all of them, meaning that it's a bia shalei kedarka for all 10. So the Rabbanan say they all get skila because they all did a bia while she was a psula. She was a psula by all their bias. Rabbi says no, only the first one gets a skila because the first one made her into a ba'ula. After that, since she's a ba'ula, she's an ara hamarasa who's a ba'ula, the halacha is that they all get chenek. So we therefore reject this pshat into how Kiddushin could work to make a ara hamarasa with a skila. Gemara brings a different answer, and that's that she can become an Nar HaMarasa if she was miskadeshes with a shtar. Shtar does not require bia to complete it, even in this pshat, because a shtar, Kiddushin shtar, is learned from Gittin, just like the get completes the divorce without anything else needed. Kiddushin shtar completes the Kiddushin without anything else needed. Okay, so now we have two sources. We have Rabbi Yochanan and we have Rebbe as to what the source of Kiddushin Bia is. The Gemara wants to know, what is Rabbi Yochanan going to do with the pasuk of Uva Ola? What is that for? So the Gemara says that's to teach that only a regular Kiddushin can be done with Bia, but you cannot do a Kinyan on an Amma Vriya to own a maidservant with bia. Why would you think that? Gemara says you may think to learn with a kavachomer from a yavama. Yavama cannot be purchased with money, but it cannot be acquired. You can't do a kinyan on the marriage with money, but there is an acquisition with bia. So an Amavriya who could be kind of with kesef should certainly be able to be kind of with bia. So Mar says, what's the proof? Yavama could work with bia because she has a zika. She has a connection to the yavam beforehand. The Amavriya never had that. The Gemara says, you're right, there's a different reason we would have thought that Kiddushin bia works for an Amma. That's because there's a hekesh between the Amma and a regular wife. Discussing the Amma, the pasuk says imacheres yikachla, if he marries another wife, meaning that there's a regular wife besides the Amma, and it links therefore the two. And just like a regular wife has niknas b'bia, you may think an Amma is niknas b'bia as well. That's why it says uva'ola dafka wife has bia, but not a Amma. Says the Gemara, how does Rebbe know that? How did Rebbe know that there's no bia by an Amma? Where it says he has two limudim from the word uva'ala, it could have just said uva'al. The uva'allah with the hay at the end gives us two drashas, and therefore we have Kiddushin bia, and we have that an Amma does not have Kiddushin, does not have a kinyan via. Gemara asks, there's another problem. There's another drasha that we need to learn from this word uva'allah. It's brought by Rava. Rava says you have a halacha Kiddushin she'ein misrun lebia lo have a Kiddushin. A Kiddushin is only valid if it matirs a bia at some point with an Nisuin later, obviously, but a Kiddushin that can never bring to a bia is an invalid Kiddushin in and of itself. That's also in from Uvala. So Gemara says there's a third drasha here. It could have said oivala. Why does it say uvala? That's to teach me the third halacha. Gemara asks, what does Rebbe do with Rebbe Yechanan's pasuk of Ba'ulas Baal? Gemara says that's to show that only a Baal can make a bia with a Shalai Kedarka, but anybody else that does a bia Shalai Kedarka does not make her into a Ba'ula. So Gemara says, but Rebbe doesn't hold of that svara. We have just brought the Brisa where Rebbe says that if you have all 10 men, then she is considered to be a Basula through all of them, and they all get skila according to the Rabbanon. But Rebbe says she becomes a Ba'ula with bia Shalai Kedarka, even though they're not her husband. So Gemara answers that Rebbe says that that's only concerning chenek. But concerning Knas, Rebbe agrees that she is considered to be a Besula, and only the husband can make a Besula through bia Shalai Kedarka. The other ones do not, and therefore they have the halachos for Knas as if she was a Besula. Now, when we speak about Knas, we're not talking about an Arusa. There is no Knas for